Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new and you like to hear about opinions, reviews, analyses, and ramblings on films, books, and TV shows, be sure to click that subscribe button for more content from me. I've already recorded this video, but then it turns out OBS just stopped randomly recording, so I'm redoing this again. So if it sounds like I'm losing my voice, I'm sorry, because I already spoke for half an hour, and yeah. Anyway, I lied, because in my last video I said I was gonna have this video up by middle of November, and guess what? It is early December, and I said it was gonna be a film chat or show spiel, and I also lied about that because, okay, to be fair, I definitely was thinking of doing The Fall of the House of Usher, but I was like, I'm gonna read the short stories first before I watch the show, and yeah, I forgot that I don't really read as fast as I used to. It takes me 12 business days to finish reading a book. So I didn't finish reading the short stories in time to try to watch the show. Yeah. So yeah, sorry about that. But it is, in my opinion, it is dark academia season. After spooky season, it's definitely dark academia. So my video today is still a dark academia-y? Okay, more academia than dark, but still. So that's why I have dark academia inspired makeup and dark academia inspired fit for today's video. So I actually also I've been dying to do another what is, because I actually had so much fun doing my last what is video, which was on the male and female gaze. Gotta put that degree to use, guys. So today's what is on a classic English literature novel, Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. So think of this video on Northanger Abbey and any future English lit novel plays that I'm gonna do. Think of it as me acting Spark Notes, but instead of you doing any readings, I just talk and all you have to do is listen. So this video and future English lit novel slash plays what is videos will follow pretty much the same format, which is where I'll provide an introduction, a summary, a list of characters and themes, and then talk about why they're important to read. So let's get into it. Northanger Abbey, in my opinion, is the most underrated of Austen's novels because well, this is actually the very first Jane Austen novel I've ever read. I know, everyone's just you're an English major, you read Pride and Prejudice. I have not read Pride and Prejudice, but Northanger Abbey was the very first Austen novel that I read back in my second year. I had to take an intro to British literature course, and when we did our unit on Jane Austen, Northanger Abbey was what we had to read, and I fell in love. So Jane Austen is well known again for writing Pride and Prejudice, Emma, Persuasion, Mansfield Park, Sense and Sensibility, and so a lot of people think that she just writes romance, but her novels actually focuses on social etiquette, especially in the middle class during the Regency era in England, and marriage politics are a huge thing in her novels too. So Northanger Abbey satirizes the Gothic novels that were popular during this time period, and it was marketed as a coming-of-age novel. This is also a metafiction, because this novel constantly reminds you that you're reading a novel and it's a novel about reading. So now let's get into this summary. So what is Northanger Abbey even about? So Catherine Morland, our heroine, she goes to Bath to stay with the Allens, who are kind of her godparents. So she has to learn how to socialize and navigate her way through society, and this is her first outing without her family. Exciting. At Bath, she meets everybody basically. So that's where she meets Isabel and John Thorpe, as well as Henry and Eleanor Tilney. First person she meets is Henry Tilney, who is a clergyman about the age of 24 to 25. Let's pause right here. Catherine is 17, and this is technically okay back then. I hate to have to say that, because it was common. 25, 17 was not a big deal back then. It is definitely a big deal now, don't get me wrong, but okay. Keeping in mind this was the time period in which it was written. So they have an almost meet cute, and they're very hard eyes for each other almost immediately, or at least Catherine is with Henry. Also, I keep looking towards the side just to make sure that this video is still recording, so I don't have to suffer the way I did earlier. Anyway, back to the story. So then after Henry Tilney, she meets Isabella Thorpe through Mrs. Allen, and Mrs. Allen is connected with Mrs. Thorpe, Isabella's mother, because they were old friends. So then she becomes friends with Isabella, who is like her very first friend, and she's also recognized by the other Thorpe sisters and their mother because they knew her brother James Morland. And then Catherine latches onto Isabella because she's 21. So she's 4 years older than Catherine, and verbatim from the novel, therefore 4 years more informed. We'll talk more later about why this is not true. So then in chapter 5 of the novel, volume 1, I want to mention this especially because there's a break in the narrative at the end, and it has a speech defending novels. So this, I just want to say, is an important passage to look at if you're looking to do your essay on the metafiction of this novel, or you want to argue about what Jane Austen's stance is on the novel. So, back to the actual story. So, at Bath, there's now a lot of back and forth with Catherine because she wants to hang out with the Tilneys, but she's constantly being pressured by, like, John, Isabella, and James to go riding with them, like, at the risk of offending the Tilneys. So, Catherine eventually, she does stand up for herself, especially against John, and she goes on a walk with the Tilneys instead of joining, like, the others for their carriage ride. This then leads Catherine to realize that she and the Tilneys, like, they love to read, especially Gothic novels, specifically the mysteries of Udolpho. And so she's having, like, this enlightening and entertaining conversation. She's just like, this is actually a lot more fun than, like, the superficial topics I talk about with Isabella. Again, she's thinking that, she's not saying it. Eventually, James and Isabella, they announce their engagement. And Isabella keeps trying to push Catherine and John together, but Catherine's just like, I'm not interested. He doesn't have a good personality. Like, as she should. He's a walking red flag. Yeah. And then Catherine, eventually, she gets invited to Northanger Abbey by General Tilney, who is Henry and Eleanor Tilney's father. But before leaving, she's starting to see some red flags with Isabella, because Isabella was flirting with Captain Tilney, Frederick Tilney, who is Henry and Eleanor's older brother, despite the fact that she was engaged to James. So after this, the rest of the novel takes place at Northanger Abbey. This is volume 2 because this novel is in 2 volumes, so at Northanger Abbey. So Catherine has certain expectations of Northanger Abbey. She loves Gothic novels. She's just like, oh my god, my chance to see, like, a real life abbey. It's gonna be scary, it's gonna be haunting, it's gonna be so cool. So, like, this is like a dream come true for her. And on the way there from Bath to Northanger Abbey, Henry entertains her by making up, like, this Gothic story, which is like this, it's actually really cute because she's, like, listening to him. And then when they arrive at Northanger Abbey, Catherine sees that it's all, like, nice and modern and not scary looking, and she's like, oh, it's not actually scary. She's, like, disappointed. And then while at Northanger Abbey, General Tilney, again, father, he keeps showing off his possessions, like his china during, like, dinner, to try and impress Catherine. She's still young, she's confused about all this, so she doesn't understand why he's trying to impress her with his wealth. And in a later chapter, there's more proof that General Tilney was definitely flexing his wealth, because he straight up provides Catherine with a summary of his finances. I'm like, dude, you are trying too hard. Anyway, coincidences happen in this part of the novel, like, that, like, kind of makes you think that you're in a Gothic novel. Like, Catherine, she finds a mysterious chest, but it's just linens inside. There's a storm during dinner. And then she finds, like, a mysterious cabinet, like the one in Henry's made-up Gothic story. It turns out it's just, like, old papers with a bunch of nonsense. And so the gist is that Catherine thinks she's in a Gothic novel, not a coming-of-age novel. She's a little delulu, but she's also not the first character to not realize what genre she's in, you know? And because she still thinks she's in a Gothic novel, she wanted to go exploring Mrs. Tilney's rooms, because she's convinced that General Tilney either had her locked up or murdered, based on the conversation she had with Eleanor. Because Eleanor said, oh, like, my mother, she passed away, like, I was away, and it was just so quick, like, I was away for a bit, I come back, she's gone. So Catherine's just like, red flag, are you not sus? So she does explore the room, and it ends up, she sees it's not all like haunted or scary looking. It's clean and modern, and she runs into Henry afterwards, and he realizes what she must have been thinking, and this leads to like the confrontation with Henry Tilney, which is the thesis of the novel. Okay, so I'm actually going to read a passage from the end of chapter 24. Dear Miss Morland, consider the dreadful nature of the suspicions you have entertained. What have you been judging from? Remember the country and age in which we live. Remember that we are English, that we are Christians. Consult your own understanding, your own sense of the probable, your own observation of what is passing around you. Does our education prepare us for such atrocities? Do our laws connive at them? Could they be perpetrated without being known, in a country like this, where social and literary intercourse is on such a footing, where every man is surrounded by a neighborhood of voluntary spies, and where roads and newspapers lay everything open? Dearest Miss Morland, what ideas have you been admitting? And so Henry is like imploring her to use her sense of rationale and reminding her like where they are, you know. Setting and laws of England would not allow for the heinous murder she thought that the general was capable of committing. And he's essentially saying that she read too much of the Gothic, that reality and fiction are blurring. And this is very important because this humbles Catherine. Like she was humbled, she was crying, she was humiliated, she was humbled. So she was, and then she strives to try to be a better reader, and you know, not to just take everything at face value, essentially. And this leads to her seeing Isabella for who she truly is. So after this confrontation, I think about a day or so after, she gets a letter from James, her brother, saying, yo, my engagement with Isabella is like over. She called it off and now she's engaged to Captain Frederick Tilney. So Catherine's just like telling Henry and Eleanor like, yo, your brother's engaged to my brother's ex. And Henry and Ella are just like, we don't think that even if Frederick did love her, that our dad's gonna let him marry her because Isabella doesn't come from a wealthy family. So at this point, Catherine's just like over. She's like, Isabella's horrid, we're not friends anymore. And I think about a day or so later, she receives a letter from Isabella, who's claiming like, oh, I have no idea why James stopped talking to me. Can you talk to me? Can you talk to him on my behalf, please? And then she's trying to claim that like she wanted nothing to do with Frederick, and Frederick was just like, you know, chasing after her. He's very persistent. But Catherine like sees between her lines. She's just like, I'm not helping you. I'm done with you, as she should. And then Henry goes away for a bit at this point, and then General Tilney comes back, and he suddenly throws her out of the abbey without like any warning, and she has to go back home to her family. So Eleanor and Catherine are both like super confused, because like Eleanor knows Catherine couldn't have done anything to offend her dad, and Catherine knows she's being kicked out, but like it's not because she thought that the general killed his wife, because Henry definitely wouldn't have told him. So she returns home. She's very depressed because she has no clue when she'd ever see Eleanor and Henry again, especially Henry. And, you know, she's all sad because she thinks that Henry's going to get married to someone else. She's just not coping very well. But she does acknowledge she has grown up a lot in the 3 months that she's been away from home. Which brings us to the ending. So Henry shows up in a typical love interest moment, like in a romance and drama film, and he tells her the full story. So he comes back home, like he had to go away, I think, because of like the church he was looking after, because again, he's like a clergyman, right? So he comes back, finds out Catherine is gone, and he's arguing with his dad when he finds out how Catherine was sent away. So apparently, turns out General Tilney thought that Catherine was a wealthy heiress because John Thorpe kept bragging about how he's gonna marry her and her wealth. He's very delulu, guys. And then he gets all mad, John, when James cuts off ties after Isabella breaks off their engagement. So Johnny Boy here tells the general that Catherine's family is actually destitute and they're trying to marry up, which is not true. Alright, and so like he basically ruined her life because he's like lashing out. Can he go jump off of a cliff? Please and thank you. Anyway, Henry loves Catherine and he wants to marry her even against his dad's objections. It's kind of funny because this is not super romantic, and the narrator at this point is just like, yeah, like Henry does genuinely like love Catherine, but he only noticed her because she was interested in him. And it's not super romantic, but it is low-key realistic, and I'll accept it. So the ending is actually very typical of a novel. So there's a promise of a marriage between Henry and Catherine, because the general decides to change his mind because Eleanor, the sister, her betrothed, like, suddenly inherited, like, a title and a bunch of money. And he also realized, the general, that Catherine may not be, like, the super wealthy heiress that he thought she was, but she's not completely, like, destitute either. Like, her family's comfortably middle class. So the general's also a little delulu, because he believed that there's a chance that the Allens, who were Catherine's godparents, could still leave their fortune to Catherine, so that, you know, they may become richer. But hey, Henry and Catherine are happy and married, so all's well that ends well. And that's how Northanger Abbey ends. So let's move on to the next part, which is where I talk about the characters. So first character we want to talk about, Catherine Morland. She's our protagonist, our heroine. So she is naive but well-meaning. So she has not been exposed to society until the novel, and she lacks life experience. But don't confuse the fact that she's naive to like with the fact that she's dumb, because she's not dumb. All right, she guessed that Eleanor Tilney was Henry's sister before they were even introduced, so she doesn't assume that he's married and just go, oh my god, he's married, you know. That being said, she is a little bit of a people pleaser, so it was very easy for, like, Isabella, John, and to an extent even James to, like, try to manipulate her. And but she does eventually, like, she grows up, because that's coming of age novels. That's what you do. Like, you grow up, you gain knowledge and wisdom, and she learns how to read critically by the end. Like, not just books, but how people talk to her. So like I said, she likes to read, but she's not well read, and this is tied to her lack of experience, which leads her to believe that novels are like real life. And she learns the hard way that the genre she loves, which is the Gothic, is not applicable to her life in England. Let's move on to the next character, Isabella Thorpe. So my professor at the time, he used the word coquettish to describe Isabella. So that means, like, she's very flirty. So she's coquettish, manipulative. She's basically like the popular girl in every high school movie. She is the Heather, one of the Heathers, to Catherine's Veronica. Okay? So she treats Catherine almost like a pet. Like, she would address her as my dearest creature. And I'm just like, girl, what? And then again, with her flirting, there's nothing technically wrong with a little bit of flirting, but in middle class circles in Regency period England, it's very, I'm 90% sure it's frowned upon. Like, you should not be, like, flirting with other people when you're engaged to somebody, sorry. And she's definitely manipulative, because she tried to, like, prevent Catherine from spending time with the Tilneys. She tries to, like, make them come off as, like, really, like, rude, when it's, like, really her and her brother who are rude. And she keeps trying to push Catherine towards John, even though Catherine's just like, I'm not really interested in your brother, you know? She's also a gold digger. So in chapter 16, James is, like, a church guy. I forgot if he's either a pastor, preacher, clergyman, whatever. His expected income is about £400 a year, and he wants to save up for, like, 2 or 3 years before, like, getting married. So he's holding off on getting married, but they're still engaged. So Isabella and her mother are complaining about how stingy Catherine's father is being, and in front of Catherine too. And Catherine's, like, hurt as hell, and she's trying to see Isabella for who she is. Plus, at this point, she's also, like, seeing her, like, flirt with Captain Tilney, so she's just, like, a little sus. So let's move on to Henry Tilney. So Henry Tilney, in my opinion, is a little bit complicated to narrow down, just because, like, he can come off as a little bit condescending, although not nearly as condescending as Isabella, because at least he doesn't address Catherine like she's a pet, or, like, see her as being below him. But since he is older, definitely more experienced, and definitely more well-read, like, he actually reads novels, he almost does act like as a teacher to her. And I mentioned chapter 24, and it's like he's almost rebuking her near the end, and he means well, and obviously it's not fun being rebuked, especially by your own love interest. But, like, how else would Catherine learn how to, like, start reading critically and stop being so quixotic for the Gothic? So that's another word my professor loved to use for Catherine, was quixotic. So it just means that she's very romantic for the Gothic. Henry at least doesn't make her feel bad for her love for the Gothic. He just kind of reminds her that, like, fiction shouldn't be confused with reality. And earlier in the novel, he was very nice and understanding when Catherine explained why she wasn't at home when the Tilneys visited, and he saw how awful she felt, and he was very reassuring. And he's just an overall, like, just decent guy, unlike John Thorpe. So he, in the novel too, like, when Catherine was, like, confiding in Henry about her worries regarding Isabella and James, because she's seeing Frederick and Isabella getting closer when her brother's not there. You know, like, he senses that she's sensitive about that. So he's trying to reassure her, and he's also capable of being, like, gentle and reassuring, you know? Also, he argued with his dad so that he could marry her. Like, I like that. We love that. That's love, baby. Now let's move on to my least favorite character in the novel, John Thorpe. So let me actually just read to you how Austen described him when he first, like, showed up. He was a stout young man of middling height, who, with a plain face and ungraceful form, seemed fearful of being too handsome unless he wore the dress of a groom, and too much like a gentleman unless he were easy where he ought to be civil, and impudent where he might be allowed to be easy. Say what you will about Jane Austen, but she knows how to describe her characters in, like, a lovely way. She's got away with words, and I love that about her. So anyway, from the get-go, John Thorpe's a walking red flag. He was like, I don't read novels. I am above reading novels. And to the people who are watching this video, if your love interest, crush, whatever, says they don't read because they're too good for reading, throw them out. Stop interacting with them. That's a red flag. That is a red flag. If you say, I don't read because, like, it's too good for me, or, like, yeah. Anyway, so John Thorpe's also, like, he's super boastful. Like, he flexes even though he doesn't have, like, anything to flex about, you know? And if he was a real guy today, he's the kind of guy who would listen to Andrew Tate and think that he's an alpha when he's not. So again, red flag. Not the guy you would ever want to befriend, let alone marry. And like I said before, he was a little delulu. Actually, he's super delulu. He's super delulu and so arrogant because he believed Catherine wants to marry him, even though she made it clear to him and Isabella that she is not interested, and she's constantly dodging, like, his attempts of spending time together. And last character I want to talk about is General Tilney himself, who is a major capitalist. As seen when he was constantly bragging about his material possessions to Catherine. Was he a jerk? Short answer, yes. And I'm not defending him, but keep in mind this time period was also, like, when people who were in the upper class, like, they really cared about wealth and status, so it's not uncommon for him to want his children to marry up. And he only allowed Henry and Catherine to marry when Eleanor's betrothed's status, like, increased. Okay, so now let's move on to the themes, and here are the three major themes from the novel. So the first is reading critically / literature in life. So the whole point of the novel was watching Catherine become a better reader. So she starts off with, like, reading for enjoyment, but she confuses that with reality, which is not how reading novels work. Can you learn from novels? The short answer is yes, but you should make sure that, like, you're not taking everything from a novel very literally the way Catherine does. And because, like, what she does is she confuses the fictional dangers she reads about in the Gothic novels as the ones that she should worry about. So, like, being kidnapped by, like, an evil baron lord, being locked up in a castle. So she thinks those are the things that she has to worry about, and she doesn't realize that the real danger is her lack of knowledge on social etiquette and propriety. Main example is that carriage rights between unmarried men and women are frowned upon during this time. She didn't realize this when she first joins, like, James, Isabella, and John on a carriage ride. And it's only, like, at a later chapter, after she declines, like, riding with John Thorpe so she could spend time with the Tilneys, she tells Mr. Allen, yeah, like, I said no, I didn't want to, like, go on a carriage ride with him. I want to spend time with the Tilneys. And Mr. Allen's just like, yeah, as you should, because, like, it's really improper for, like, unmarried men and women to be in the same, like, to do a carriage ride unsupervised. And she's just like, oh, man, I didn't know that. So, like, her reputation could have been very easily, like, ruined, you know? Second theme is experience and growth. And that's kind of related to the first one of, like, literature and life. So Catherine had 0 life experience. All right, she's never been out to society until she went to stay with the Allens at Bath. And all of her experience and knowledge comes from reading novels, which leads her to believe that novels are her guide to life. And again, obviously, she's very wrong because Gothic novels, particularly, are not a guide to life, like as a middle class English woman like Catherine. And her lack of experience makes her latched onto Isabella because she believes she's more informed and experienced. This was very dangerous because Isabella is manipulative, and Catherine's naivete made it easy for Isabella to manipulate her into spending time with her and John, despite John acting improperly. Also, like the way Isabella would blatantly lie about her intentions with men. Like, Catherine would have been screwed if she acted the way Isabella did. And in the end, like, you know, Isabella is the one without an engagement. Because James wants nothing to do with her. Like, Catherine was like, I'm not gonna talk to, like, my brother for you. Like, we're not friends anymore. And Frederick Tilney, like, abandoned her too. So with Catherine, like, in interacting with other people at Bath, like, such as Henry, specifically Henry, it helps her realize and learn to read people's motivations better because she's operated under the assumption that everyone thinks like her. So an example is like Catherine being like she's watching Isabella and Frederick Tilney dance even though Isabella's engaged. She's just like, why the frick is Frederick dancing with an engaged woman? We, the readers, know why, because Frederick is a jerk who doesn't care. But Catherine's definitely naive enough, and she doesn't realize why Frederick and Isabella would act so improperly in public. Like, she still thinks highly of Isabella at this point, but she was, like, you know, she was getting suspicious. And the third major theme is class and wealth. So class and wealth is actually a big theme in Austen's novels, especially this one. And the theme of class and wealth tie into marriage proposals as well. So Catherine's family is comfortably middle class, which is actually a really funny phrase because that's exactly what rich people would say when you ask them, so like, how wealthy are you? And you're like, we're comfortable. Like, that's the same vibe. So because they're comfortably middle class, this leads Isabella to the assumption that marrying James would mean she can live comfortably, and John to also assume that marrying Catherine would mean marrying up. So the £400 a year that James was gonna get from his dad apparently wasn't like enough from Isabella, since she and her mother were complaining about how stingy Mr. Moreland was. Like, I don't know if this is a lot, I don't know the conversion rate. I thought £400 was huge back then, but I guess in terms of being middle class, like, that's not enough because, again, they were complaining about it, like, in front of Catherine. And General Tilney is another character who cares so much about wealth and class because he thought Catherine was like this wealthy heiress because of John Thorpe's bragging. So he was doing his best to push Catherine and Henry together. He's constantly flexing his material possessions, even though Catherine was like very confused behind his motivations. So again, he wants his children to marry up, and he only allowed Henry and Catherine to marry when Eleanor like married up, and he found out that Catherine wasn't as destitute as John Thorpe made her out to be after he was rejected. So that being said, the general does still hold on to the belief that with the Allens being her godparents and not having their own kids, they could leave their fortune to Catherine like when they die. And this theme also applies to Frederick and Isabella Thorpe's entanglement. And yes, I'm calling it an entanglement because it's hilarious. So anyway, it was confirmed by Catherine that the Thorpes are not very wealthy, and so they're definitely trying to marry up. Frederick doesn't love Isabella, and he was honestly just looking for a little bit of like harmless flirting and dancing. And Frederick is the heir to the Tilney fortune, and he's also a captain, so ooh, swoons, man in uniform. So Isabella sees him as being above James, who is, still don't know what he does. He's either a pastor, clergyman, preacher, he's a church dude. Anyway, so like that's why she broke the engagement off, because James did not make enough money to interest her. And you know, with Frederick being an heir to the fortune guys. So then Frederick actually has no interest in marrying her, like I said, so that leaves her without marriage prospects like at the end. Was he a jerk for what he did? Yes, of course he was, but I can't even hate him for it because Isabella, she around and found out. Alright, so now why should you read this novel? So Northanger Abbey like teaches you how to read critically, which leads you to reading between the lines, like not just in like novels, short stories, whatever, but in social interactions as well. And it helps you understand that while novels can provide an experience and can be a form of escapism, they're not necessarily guides to real life. And for me as a writer, I draw on experiences from reality to write fictional stories, obviously, but again, the main thing is you learn not to blur the lines, okay? So with the rise of social media, like especially TikTok and people being chronically online, just not a lot of critical reading is being done. The lines of fiction and reality are very blurred, especially in these like online spaces, and I don't want to sound preachy, like this is not my intention, but even like reading news articles and headlines, like people are so very quick to believe anything and everything they read online. And so reading critically is an important skill to have, especially when there's just so much information and misinformation that is being spread easily. Critical readers don't fall for propaganda very easily. They're able to like, okay, what is this article actually trying to say? Who's it trying to entice? Who is it against? Like that sort of thing, So that's why I feel like reading critically, like it's not a skill not many people have, but it's a skill all of us need, especially like in this day and age. Plus, in reading Northanger Abbey, Austen's language, this was written again back in the 1800s, late 1700s, early 1800s. Her language does require a bit of unpacking. So like when you're reading this, you need a little bit of brain power. But it's still like a nice exercise in reading critically, because you're like trying to figure out what is she actually trying to say? What are these people like in her novels actually trying to say? So I think that's why you should read Northanger Abbey. So we're coming to the end of this video, so let me just sum up everything for you real quick. Northanger Abbey is a coming-of-age novel and personally the most underrated Austen novel. It's a novel about reading and understanding that novels provide an experience, but they don't necessarily act as a guide to real life. It does show characters like Henry Tilney enjoying reading so that they can acknowledge that what they're reading, like novel-wise, is fictional, and they don't believe this is like how they should live their life. They don't see the novels as a gospel truth, And the novel also emphasizes on the importance of reading critically and how that translates to being a good judge of character. Because being a critical reader helps you read people's motivations and characters better, like based on like just their word choices, Catherine Morland learns how to read properly, and this leads to her realizing that Isabella Thorpe is not the wise mentor she initially thought she was. She's not a good person, and she has a complete disregard for social etiquette and propriety, as well as, she's a gold digger. And the novel does end happily with a marriage between Henry and Catherine. Yay. There's just literally like so many things you can analyze like in your essays regarding this novel, like from the critical reading, which is like the main thing I've been talking about, the author/narrator stance on the novel, the commentary on wealth and class and how that ties into marriage politics. My essay actually for the Intro to British Literature class that I took, I did it on Henry Tilney as Oscar Wilde's ideal critic in relation to how well read he is. So again, these are just a few ideas for essays if you guys are stuck on them, okay? And that's a wrap on Northanger Abbey. If you've got suggestions for film theories, film concepts, film history things, or even like English literature novels or plays for me to discuss, feel free to comment down below. Send this video to your friends who might need help understanding Northanger Abbey, or like they're pressed for time and haven't read the book and you got to talk about it in class. And if you got suggestions on films, books, and TV shows for me to talk about, like feel free to comment those like down below as well. So my next video will hopefully, ideally, be on the fall of the House of Usher. And then it's going to be followed by my yearly film and book rankings of 2023. And then that's going to be my last video of the year. So thank you so much for watching. Have an awesome day. And please don't forget to like, comment, or subscribe. See you guys next time. Bye.